The stars had always fascinated Empress Jinnah. From her earliest days as a young royal on Taguk Prime, she would spend hours gazing through telescopes at distant galaxies. Now, as ruler of the most powerful civilization in the known universe, she had access to technology beyond imagination. The long-range scanner room aboard her flagship, Eternal Glory, was her favorite place, a vast chamber with holographic displays showing real-time information from across the stars. "Your Majesty, we've detected new signals from Sector 87, reported Officer Min, bowing deeply before approaching the central console. "It appears to be communications from a developing world." Jinnah raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Sector 87 had been largely ignored by the Taguk Empire, considered too remote and resource-poor to warrant serious attention. She glided across the polished floor, her ornate robes flowing behind her like liquid silver. "Show me," she commanded. The holographic display shifted, focusing on a small blue-green planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Data began streaming alongside the image. Atmospheric composition, surface temperature ranges, and primitive electromagnetic communications. Jinnah's lips curled into a smirk. "They're still using radio waves." "How quaint." "Yes, Your Majesty. Analysis suggests they've only recently developed space travel and have barely reached their own satellite." The Empress leaned forward, studying the information with growing amusement. These creatures, humans according to their own transmissions, seemed to think themselves advanced. Their spacecraft were little more than metal cans propelled by chemical explosions. Their weapons were laughably primitive. Their societal structure was chaotic and inefficient. "What resources does this Earth possess?" she asked. Officer Min tapped several commands into the console. "Considerable mineral wealth, Your Majesty. Rare metals, fossil fuels, and unusually large water reserves. The planet itself is positioned in a strategically useful location." Jinnah's eyes gleamed with interest. The Taguk Empire was always hungry for new mining worlds. Her engineers required ever-increasing amounts of raw materials to fuel their vast construction projects and maintain their technological superiority. "Prepare a small scout fleet," she ordered. "Let's observe these humans more closely before deciding their fate." 3 Taguk months passed. Scout ships monitored Earth from a distance, collecting data and analyzing human capabilities. The reports confirmed Jinnah's initial assessment. Humans posed no threat to the Empire. Their technology was centuries behind, their military forces primitive, and their political systems divided. Then came something unexpected. Earth's most powerful nations detected the scout ships, and instead of responding with fear or aggression, sent a diplomatic mission. A single ship, broadcasting peace messages in multiple formats, approached the edge of their solar system requesting communication. "How amusing," Jinnah remarked when informed of this development. "They wished to talk." Her advisors suggested destroying the human vessel as a warning, but the Empress had a different idea. "No, invite them to Taguk Prime. I wish to meet these bold little creatures face to face." Captain Deho had been selected for this historic mission after a global search for Earth's finest diplomat. Calm under pressure, brilliant in multiple fields, and possessing an uncanny ability to understand alien perspectives, he represented humanity's best hope for peaceful first contact. His small crew included linguists, scientists, and cultural experts. Earth's brightest minds united in this momentous endeavor. When the human diplomatic vessel arrived at Taguk Prime, they were escorted by Imperial warships that dwarfed their craft. Deho maintained his composure despite the intimidating display of power. His mission was too important for fear. The royal palace of Taguk Prime was a structure of impossible beauty, with soaring crystal spires and gravity-defying architecture. Captain Deho and his team were led through enormous hallways decorated with artifacts from 1,000 conquered worlds. The message was clear: the Taguk Empire was ancient, powerful, and accustomed to dominance. The throne room fell silent as the humans entered. Hundreds of Taguk nobles and military officers stood in perfect formation, their expressions showing a mixture of curiosity and disdain. At the center, on an elevated platform, sat Empress Jinnah. Her beauty was otherworldly, her posture perfect, her gaze cold and calculating. Captain Deho approached the throne and bowed respectfully. Empress Jinnah, I bring greetings from Earth. We come in peace, seeking friendship between our worlds. Jinnah studied the human with thinly veiled amusement. Captain Deho, she replied, her universal translator converting her words to his language. Your courage is noted. Few species would dare approach the Taguk Empire as equals. We approach not as equals, Your Majesty, but as neighbors hoping to learn and grow. Earth has much to offer in cultural exchange, scientific collaboration, and the Empress's laughter cut him off, a musical sound that echoed through the vast chamber. The Taguk court joined her, filling the room with mocking laughter. Cultural exchange, Jinnah repeated, her voice dripping with condescension. What could your primitive species possibly teach us? We were building wonders across the stars while your ancestors were still discovering fire. Deho maintained his diplomatic composure. Every civilization has unique perspectives, Your Majesty. Different doesn't mean lesser. Jinnah rose from her throne, her movements graceful yet predatory. She descended the steps until she stood directly before the human captain. Though her form was humanoid, her alien nature became more apparent up close. Her skin had a subtle iridescence, her eyes contained geometric patterns instead of irises, and she stood nearly 2 heads taller than Deho. Let me be clear, Captain, she said, her voice now hard and cold. Earth has been evaluated and found useful only for its resources. Your planet will become a mining outpost for the Empire. Your people may serve as laborers if they prove capable. Resistance would be unfortunate. Whispers spread through Deho's team. This was worse than their worst-case scenario. Surely we can negotiate terms that benefit both our peoples. Deho attempted, but the Empress had already turned away. There is nothing to negotiate. Be grateful I'm allowing you to return to Earth to deliver this message. You have 1 standard year to prepare your world for imperial occupation. She waved her hand dismissively. The audience is concluded. As the human delegation was escorted from the throne room, Jinnah called after them. Consider yourselves fortunate, Captain. Many species never receive such generous warning. The journey back to Earth was tense and silent. Captain Deho reviewed recordings of the meeting repeatedly, looking for any diplomatic opening he might have missed. The conclusion was always the same. The Taguk Empire viewed humanity as insects, useful only for the resources they happened to possess. Meanwhile, across the vastness of space, Empress Jinnah had already forgotten the humans. Another conquest, another mining world, routine expansion for the Empire. How could she know that her dismissal of humanity would become the greatest mistake of her reign? On Earth, the diplomatic failure triggered emergency meetings of world leaders. Ancient enemies became reluctant allies against this existential threat. In a secure underground facility, Admiral Kyung slammed his fist on the table. We cannot surrender without a fight, he declared to the assembled military and scientific leaders. Chief Scientist Hana, renowned for her breakthroughs in quantum physics, stepped forward. We may not need to fight conventionally. She activated a holographic display showing theoretical spacecraft designs unlike anything Earth had previously developed. My team has been working on advanced propulsion and weapon systems. With proper funding and global cooperation, we might create something the Empress isn't expecting. Admiral Kyung studied the designs, his expression changing from doubt to cautious hope. How long would this take? Longer than the year we've been given, Hannah admitted. We would need to hide our true preparations while appearing to prepare for surrender. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Their only hope required deception on a planetary scale. Admiral Kyung nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll do. He turned to address the full gathering. Today, we begin Operation Nightfall. The Empress thinks she knows humanity. She's about to learn how wrong she is. As the meeting adjourned, no one noticed the small smile on Captain Daho's face. The Empress's mockery had wounded his pride, but it had also revealed something crucial. She underestimated humanity, and in that underestimation lay the seeds of Earth's possible salvation. The snow fell gently outside the windows of Facility 7, buried deep within the Arctic Circle. Inside, Engineer Subin hunched over her workstation, dark circles under her eyes, evidence of another sleepless night. On the table before her lay pieces of what had once been a Taguk scout probe. The world governments had recovered it from the ocean floor months ago, after it malfunctioned and crashed during Earth surveillance. Any progress? Asked Director Wei, entering the room with 2 steaming cups of coffee. Subin accepted the cup gratefully. Yes and no. Their power systems operate on principles we theorized but never implemented. It's like they skipped several steps in technological evolution. The director nodded, looking at the disassembled alien technology. But you can understand it. I'm getting there. Subin picked up a small crystal component that glowed faintly blue. This is the key. It's not just an energy source. It's also information storage and transmission. They've merged systems we keep separate. Above them, on the surface, construction crews work day and night building what appeared to be internment camps, places for humans to be processed once the Taguk arrived to claim their new mining world. The Empress's ambassadors visited regularly, nodding with approval at humanity's apparent acceptance of their fate. What they didn't know was that beneath these fake surrender preparations, a different kind of work was happening. Facility 7 was one of 12 hidden research centers around the globe, each focused on a different aspect of alien technology. Subin's team had the most critical task: propulsion. Without matching Taguk speed, humanity had no hope. 3 months into the project, Subin made her breakthrough. She burst into the facility's main conference room during an executive briefing, interrupting Admiral Kyung mid-sentence. "I've got it," she announced, eyes wide with excitement. "The crystal matrix can be replicated using Earth materials." The room fell silent. Admiral Kyung, normally strict about protocol, simply nodded for her to continue. Subin placed a device on the table, a rough prototype that hummed with energy. "It's not as elegant as theirs, but it works on the same principle. We can create drives that match their speed using modified rare earth elements processed under quantum conditions." "How soon until production?" asked the Admiral. "We'll need massive manufacturing facilities, but the process itself is surprisingly simple once you understand the underlying science." Subin took a deep breath. 3 months for the first working engine. 6 months for fleet-scale production. A murmur ran through the room. It wasn't enough time to build a force that could match the Taguk Empire, but it was a start. Admiral Kyung stood. "Then we proceed with Phase 2. Phase 2 was already underway in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Commander Ta-1 floated in the observation deck of what would soon become humanity's first deep space shipyard. Through the reinforced glass, he watched as construction drones swarmed around the framework of immense docking bays carved directly into a 20-kilometer-wide asteroid. "Status report," he requested, touching the communication panel on his wrist. "Mining operations at 173% of projected capacity, Commander," came the reply. "The automated refineries are processing ore faster than anticipated." This was the beauty of working in space. Once you overcame the initial challenges, efficiency skyrocketed. No atmosphere to create drag, abundant resources in the asteroids, and most importantly, no Taguk observers. Their scouts focused on Earth itself, paying little attention to what they considered primitive human operations in the outer solar system. What had begun as research outposts and small mining operations had quickly transformed into industrial centers hidden in plain sight. The Empire knew humans had a small presence here, but they didn't know that presence was expanding exponentially, powered by desperation and ingenuity. "And the lunar facility?" Ta-1 asked. "Weapons development proceeding on schedule. Dr. Jun reports successful tests of the shield technology. Taiwan allowed himself a small smile. The shield technology had been Dr. Jun's masterstroke, a defensive system developed not from the crashed probe, but from analyzing the energy signatures of Taguk ships during their visits. If it worked as designed, it would render their weapons significantly less effective. Back on Earth, the deception continued. World leaders publicly prepared their people for peaceful transition to Taguk authority. Resources were openly stockpiled, supposedly for the handover, actually bound for space on unmarked shuttles. Mining operations increased globally, officially to demonstrate Earth's value, secretly to fuel the largest construction project in human history. 6 months into Operation Nightfall, Engineer Su Bin stood beside Admiral Kyung in a hidden facility beneath the Pacific Ocean. Before them, suspended in an enormous construction bay, hung the engine core that would power humanity's first true interstellar vessel. "It's beautiful," Kyung said quietly. Su Bin nodded. "And 10 times more powerful than the Taguk equivalent." They've grown complacent in their superiority. Their technology is impressive but inefficient. We've been forced to optimize every component due to our limited resources. In orbit around Taguk Prime, Empress Jin received the regular reports from Earth with decreasing interest. The humans were behaving exactly as expected, resigned to their future as imperial subjects. How utterly predictable. She had no way of knowing that beyond her sensor's range, humanity was building a fleet that would soon darken the skies of her empire. The sky above Earth changed on a Tuesday morning. It began with strange lights visible even in daylight, pinpricks of purple energy that grew larger by the minute. People stopped in streets, pointed upward, and felt the first shivers of true fear. This was no natural phenomenon. This was the arrival they had been dreading for exactly 1 year. Colonel June stood on the roof of the United Earth Defense Headquarters, watching the Taguk warships materialize in low orbit. Even from this distance, their size was breathtaking. The lead vessel alone stretched nearly 10 kilometers from bow to stern, dwarfing anything humans had built, at least anything the Taguk knew about. "They're early," remarked his aide, checking her watch, 3 hours ahead of their announced arrival time. June nodded, unsurprised. "A tactical choice. They want to catch us off balance." Around the world, citizens rushed to designated assembly points as sirens wailed. The public narrative for the past year had been one of preparation for peaceful transition to Taguk authority. Only a select few knew the truth. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the lead ship," the aide reported. The colonel adjusted his uniform and took a deep breath. "Put it through to the main command center. It's time to play our part." Inside the command center, screens lit up with the image of a Taguk commander. His skin had the characteristic iridescent sheen of his species, and his uniform bore insignia indicating high rank. "This is Commander Kyo of the Imperial Taguk Expansion Fleet," he announced without preamble. "Your deadline has arrived. Surrender your military control immediately or face orbital bombardment." Colonel June stepped into view of the camera. "This is Colonel June of United Earth Defense. We request time to organize an orderly transition as previously." "Your request is denied," interrupted Commander Kyo. "You have 30 minutes to power down all defensive systems and prepare for occupation forces. The Empress herself has come to witness your submission." The transmission cut off. Around the command center, officers exchanged glances that mixed genuine concern with carefully rehearsed reactions. "Sound general quarters," ordered June. "Deploy our orbital defense platforms and scramble fighter squadrons. Make it look good, people." This was the most dangerous part of the plan. Earth needed to present resistance that seemed desperate yet futile, enough to satisfy Taguk expectations, but not so threatening as to provoke immediate devastating retaliation. Across Earth's orbit, outdated defense satellites activated, targeting the Taguk fleet with weapons that everyone knew would be ineffective against their advanced shields. Squadrons of atmospheric fighters launched from bases worldwide, their pilots fully aware they were serving as little more than a distraction. On the bridge of her flagship, Eternal Glory, Empress Jinnah watched the human response with mild amusement. "They actually think they can fight," she remarked to her senior officers. "How charmingly primitive." "Should we eliminate their defenses, Your Majesty?" asked Commander Kyo. The Empress waved a slender hand dismissively. "Let them exhaust themselves first. It will make the submission more complete when they realize the futility of resistance." And so the one-sided battle began. Earth's orbital platforms fired their most powerful weapons, producing spectacular light shows against Taguk shields, but causing no damage. Human fighters approached the alien vessels, only to be swatted away by automated defense systems. Colonel Jun coordinated the defense with apparent determination, issuing orders that sent human forces into carefully choreographed engagements, each designed to appear desperate while avoiding any action that might trigger a full-scale bombardment. 3 hours into the conflict, Jun received word that the Empress was growing impatient. "Time for the next phase," he told his senior staff. "Begin the staged retreat. Make it look like our systems are failing." Around the world, defense installations began shutting down one by one, creating the impression of a civilization whose resistance was crumbling. Emergency broadcasts announced that military leadership was considering surrender terms to prevent further loss of life. From her command throne, Empress Jinnah smiled with satisfaction. "Prepare my shuttle," she instructed. "I wish to deliver the terms of occupation personally." Her advisors exchanged concerned glances. "Your Majesty," ventured one, "protocol suggests remaining aboard the flagship until security is confirmed." "These humans pose no threat," Jinnah replied, her tone making clear the matter was settled. "Their pitiful defense has been crushed exactly as predicted. Besides, I wish to see Captain Daho's face when I inform him of his people's new status." The Imperial shuttle departed from the Eternal Glory, escorted by a formation of elite guard ships. As they descended through Earth's atmosphere, Jinnah gazed through the viewport at the blue planet that would soon be just another entry in the Empire's resource ledger. The designated landing zone was a large plaza in front of the United Earth Defense Headquarters. Colonel Jun stood at the head of a formation of high-ranking officers, all wearing formal uniforms that had been created specifically for this occasion. As the Empress's shuttle touched down with elegant precision, crowds of citizens gathered at the edges of the plaza, held back by security forces. The public had been told this was a moment of historic importance, the beginning of Earth's new future as part of a galactic civilization. The shuttle's ramp extended, and an honor guard of Taguk warriors emerged first, their ceremonial armor gleaming in Earth's sunlight. Then came Empress Jinnah herself, walking with regal grace, her silver robes flowing around her tall figure. The plaza fell silent at the sight of her alien beauty and unmistakable authority. Colonel Jun stepped forward and bowed precisely as cultural specialists had advised, low enough to show respect, but not so low as to appear completely subservient. "Empress Jinnah, Earth acknowledges your arrival." The Empress studied him briefly before turning her attention to the gathered crowd. "Your resistance was futile, as I warned it would be. Yet I am not without mercy. Those who serve the Empire well may find rewards beyond their current understanding." She gestured, and an aide brought forward an ornate document case. "These are the terms of your world's incorporation into the Taguk Empire. Your resources now belong to us. Your people will be evaluated for useful skills. Those found suitable will be permitted to work in Imperial facilities. The rest will be relocated as the Empire determines appropriate." Colonel Jun accepted the document case with another bow. "If I may ask, Your Majesty, what assurances do we have regarding the treatment of our citizens?" Jinnah's eyes narrowed slightly. "You are in no position to ask for assurances, Colonel. However, the Empire does not destroy useful resources without cause. Cooperate, and your people will survive. Resist further, and they will not." She turned to address the crowd directly, her voice amplified by subtle technology. "People of Earth, 1 year ago I gave your leaders notice of this day. They chose to waste that time with a pointless show of resistance. Let this be your first lesson as Imperial subjects. The Taguk Empire cannot be opposed." As she spoke, Colonel Jum's hand moved to his collar, pressing a concealed communication device. He spoke 3 words, so quietly that even those standing nearby couldn't hear. "Execute Operation Nightfall." Across the solar system, in hidden bases and stealth shipyards, those same words appeared on secure communication channels. Commanders who had been waiting for this moment for months now sprang into action. On the bridge of the supercarrier Defiance, Commander Tadwan received the message and turned to his crew. "All hands to battle stations. Activate drive systems and prepare for trans-light jump to Earth." Similar scenes played out across nearly 200 vessels hidden throughout the solar system. Engines that had been kept dormant now hummed to life. Weapon systems powered up. Shield generators activated. Back on Earth, Empress Jinna continued her speech, unaware that the greatest military surprise in Taguk history was now unfolding. "The transition will begin immediately. Your designated leaders will." She stopped mid-sentence, her attention caught by something in the sky. Colonel Jun followed her gaze and allowed himself a small smile. Right on schedule, the atmosphere above them had begun to shimmer with the distinctive distortion of multiple ships dropping out of light speed. Confusion spread through the Taguk honor guard. One of them activated a communication device, speaking urgently. "Your Majesty, we're detecting multiple unknown vessels appearing in orbit." Jinna's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief as her own communication device chimed with urgent messages from her flagship. "What is happening?" she demanded. Colonel Jun straightened to his full height, no longer maintaining the posture of a defeated officer. "Empress Jinna, it seems there's been a misunderstanding. You believed we spent the past year preparing for surrender." He smiled more openly now. "We had other plans." In the sky above them, the distortions grew more pronounced. Then, one by one, massive shapes began to materialize, ships larger than anything the Taguk had brought to Earth. Their hulls gleamed with unfamiliar technology, clearly human in design, but far beyond what the Empire had believed possible. The first to appear was the Defiance, its 3-kilometer length casting a shadow across the city below. Then came the Resilience, the Courage, the Hope, each supercarrier accompanied by its own battle group of smaller but equally advanced vessels. Jinna's face had lost its regal composure. "Impossible," she whispered. "Your species doesn't have this technology." "We didn't," agreed Jun, "until we needed it." Around the world, hidden launch facilities opened to reveal additional ships rising to join the fleet in orbit. The carefully orchestrated deception was now complete. What had appeared to be a civilization preparing for surrender had instead been building the most powerful defensive force in human history. On every military communication channel across Earth and throughout the human fleet, the same message now displayed. Operation Nightfall is now in effect. All units proceed as trained. Empress Jinna stared at the sky, watching as more and more ships appeared, their numbers growing until they began to blot out the sun itself. Her empire had arrived expecting submission and found something else entirely. The day that had begun with Taguk warships dominating Earth's skies was ending with a very different image, one that would soon be transmitted across the galaxy as a warning to any who might underestimate humanity again. Commander Hyun stood on the bridge of the supercarrier Invincible, watching as Earth grew larger on the main view screen. Her hands were steady as she adjusted her uniform, but her heart pounded in her chest. This was the moment humanity had prepared for over the past year, their one chance to change the future. "All ships report ready, Commander," her first officer announced. "Formation is holding through the approach." Hyun nodded, her expression calm despite the stakes. "Maintain stealth protocols until we reach checkpoint Delta. Then deploy in attack formation Nightfall 7. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. None of them had ever participated in a real space battle. Such things hadn't existed for humanity until today. Yet they moved with confidence born from countless simulations and drills. "Detecting Taguk vessels in Earth orbit," reported the sensor officer. 37 capital ships, including the Empress's flagship. They're firing on our defense platforms. Hyun's jaw tightened, even knowing it was part of the plan. Seeing Earth under attack stirred anger in her chest. Time to checkpoint Delta. 3 minutes, Commander. She opened the fleet-wide communication channel. All ships, this is Commander Hyun. In 3 minutes, we reveal ourselves and the true strength of humanity. Remember your training. Remember why we fight. For Earth. The response came back from 200 vessels, hidden throughout the solar system. For Earth. Hidden behind the moon, 50 supercarriers and their escort ships waited in perfect formation. Beneath Earth's oceans, massive hangar doors were opening to release another 50 that had been constructed in secret underwater facilities. From the asteroid belt, and from behind the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, the remainder of humanity's secret fleet was converging. On the Empress's flagship, alarms began to sound. Your Majesty, a Taguk officer called urgently. Our sensors are detecting multiple anomalies approaching Earth. Empress Jinnah, who had been watching the one-sided battle with bored satisfaction, turned sharply. What kind of anomalies? Unknown vessels, Your Majesty. They're appearing from everywhere. Show me, she commanded. The main display shifted to a tactical view of Earth and its surroundings. What Jinnah saw made no sense to her. Hundreds of objects were converging on Earth from all directions, objects far larger than any human vessel should be. And their energy signatures, impossible. Magnify the closest approaching vessel, she ordered, voice tight with sudden concern. The image shifted to show a massive ship emerging from behind Earth's moon. Its design was unmistakably human, yet it incorporated elements that resembled Taguk technology, refined and improved. The ship was enormous, easily matching her flagship in size. How is this possible? She whispered. They're supposed to be primitive. On the bridge of the Invincible, Commander Hyun gave the order they had been waiting to deliver. Disengage stealth systems. Power shields to maximum. Deploy in attack formation. Across the solar system, humanity's true fleet revealed itself. Shield systems designed by Hyun's team activated, surrounding each vessel with a shimmering field of energy far more advanced than the Taguk expected from humans. Propulsion systems engage, bringing the scattered fleet together in a coordinated approach that spoke of months of planning and preparation. The Taguk officers on the Imperial flagship watched in growing horror as their sensors showed the full scale of what was happening. Not just a few ships, but hundreds, a fleet that dwarfed their own expeditionary force. Your Majesty, the fleet commander said, his voice unsteady, I recommend immediate retreat. We are significantly outnumbered. Jinnah's face hardened. The Taguk Empire does not retreat from primitives. Target their lead vessels and fire all weapons. The Taguk ships responded immediately, unleashing energy beams and plasma torpedoes at the approaching human fleet. The weapons, designed to annihilate anything humans could possibly build, struck Hyun's ships directly, and did nothing. Commander Hyun allowed herself a small smile as the tactical display confirmed what they had hoped. Their shields were holding. Engineer Subin's adaptation of Taguk technology had worked beyond their expectations, creating defensive fields that could absorb and disperse the Empire's standard weapons. All ships, hold position, Hyun ordered. Let them exhaust their primary weapons. No return fire until my command. The Taguk continued their barrage, pouring increasingly powerful attacks against the human vessels. Confusion spread through their ranks as weapon after weapon proved ineffective against shields that should have been impossible for humans to create. On the Imperial flagship, Jinnah watched with growing disbelief. How are they blocking our weapons? This is impossible. Your Majesty, her science officer reported, analysis suggests their shields are based on our own technology, but modified. They've somehow improved upon our designs. Jinnah's eyes widened. In 1,000 years of Imperial expansion, no species had ever reverse-engineered Taguk technology so quickly, let alone improved it. The implications were staggering. Meanwhile, more human ships continued to arrive. They moved with precision into a formation that gradually surrounded the Taguk fleet. From the ocean depths rose massive vessels that had been hidden beneath the waves. From behind planets and moons came ships that had been constructed in secret. From Earth's surface launched smaller craft that joined the growing armada. Commander Hyun studied the tactical display showing the completed formation. 200 supercarriers, each with its own escort of smaller but equally advanced vessels, now surrounded the Taguk fleet completely. It was the most powerful fighting force ever created by human hands, a force that had been built entirely in secret while the Empire believed Earth was preparing to surrender. "Commander," her communications officer called, "we're receiving a transmission from Colonel June on the surface. The Empress has landed with a small delegation." Hyun nodded. This was unexpected but potentially useful. "Acknowledge and continue with the operation. All ships, execute maneuver Nightfall 8. The human fleet began to tighten its formation, closing around the Taguk vessels like a fist. The supercarriers moved into higher orbit, positioning themselves to block the Taguk ship's view of the stars, a psychological tactic designed to emphasize how completely they were surrounded. On the bridge of the Imperial flagship, now under the command of Fleet Admiral Rai in the Empress's absence, panic was setting in. "We've lost contact with the Empress's shuttle," an officer reported. "The humans are jamming our communications to the surface." Admiral Rai stared at the tactical display, showing the overwhelming human force surrounding them. "Prepare for emergency light jump. We must retreat and report this to the Empire." "Sir," the navigation officer replied, voice tight with fear, "we're detecting some kind of interference field. Our light drive calculations are returning errors. I don't think we can jump." This had been another of Engineer Subin's innovations, a field that disrupted the precise calculations needed for faster-than-light travel. The Taguk fleet was trapped. Commander Hyun opened a channel to the Imperial flagship. "Taguk vessel, this is Commander Hyun of the Earth Defense Fleet. Your weapons are ineffective against our shields. Your light drives have been neutralized. You are surrounded and outnumbered. Stand down immediately." There was a long pause before Admiral Rai's face appeared on the view screen. His expression was a mixture of disbelief and fury. "This is impossible. Your species could not have developed this technology in a single year." "You gave us motivation," Hyun replied simply. "We did what we had to do." Below on Earth's surface, Empress Jinnah was experiencing a similar shock. From her position in the plaza where she had expected to accept Earth's surrender, she now looked up to see the sky filled with human warships. Her own fleet was barely visible, surrounded by vessels that should not exist. "What have you done?" she demanded of Colonel June, who stood calmly beside her. "We adapted," he answered. "You showed us a glimpse of your technology when you sent scout ships to observe us. That was your first mistake. Your second was giving us a year to prepare." Jinnah's guards moved to protect her, but they were hopelessly outnumbered by human forces that had suddenly revealed themselves around the plaza. "You underestimated us," June continued. "You saw our division and thought it weakness. You didn't realize that humanity is at its most creative, its most determined, when faced with a common threat." In orbit, Commander Hyun gave her next order. "Deploy the Lightbringer cannons. Target their weapon systems only." Across the human fleet, newly developed weapons powered up, another technology derived from studying Taguk designs, but pushed in directions the Empire had never explored. Beams of concentrated energy struck the Taguk vessels with surgical precision, disabling their offensive capabilities without destroying the ships themselves. Admiral Rai watched helplessly as his fleet was systematically disarmed. "This is an act of war against the Taguk Empire," he warned. "Our full military will respond." "Perhaps," Commander Hyun acknowledged. "But first, you'll carry a message back to your people. Humanity is not for conquest. We sought peace. You chose domination. Remember what you see here today." As she spoke, The human fleet continued its maneuvers, hundreds of massive ships moving in perfect coordination. From the surface of Earth and from the bridges of the Taguk vessels, the sight was the same. Human warships filling the sky, blocking out the stars themselves. It was an image designed to sear itself into Taguk memory. An image that said more clearly than words ever could, humanity will not be conquered. In the plaza below, Colonel June turned to Empress Jinnah. Your Majesty, I believe it's time we discussed new terms for our relationship. The Empress of the mighty Taguk Empire, who had arrived expecting submission, found herself in a position she had never imagined possible, facing a species that had outmaneuvered her, outthought her, and now held the future of her fleet in their hands. And above them all, Commander Hyun's supercarriers continued their silent demonstration of power, their massive hulls blotting out the stars like an artificial night. The Grand Hall of Unity had been built in just 6 months, a marvel of engineering nestled in the neutral territory of Earth's moon. Its transparent dome offered a breathtaking view of both Earth and the stars beyond, a deliberate architectural choice to remind all who gathered there of what was at stake. Today, the hall was filled to capacity with representatives from every nation on Earth and a delegation from the Taguk Empire. Empress Jinnah entered the hall flanked by guards, not her own imperial warriors, but human security forces in gleaming blue uniforms. Her posture remained regal despite her circumstances, her face betraying no emotion as she was led to the central podium where Admiral Kyung and the United Earth Council waited. Empress Jinnah of the Taguk Empire, announced the council chairperson, you stand before the United Peoples of Earth to determine the future relationship between our civilizations. The Empress surveyed the room, noting the mix of hostility and curiosity in the human faces. 3 days had passed since the stunning reversal of fortune in Earth's orbit. 3 days during which her fleet remained surrounded by human supercarriers, powerless but unharmed. I am here under duress, Jinnah stated coldly. Any agreements made under such conditions are invalid under imperial law. Admiral Kyung stepped forward. He was not a tall man, but he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had guided humanity through its greatest crisis. Your Majesty, he said, his voice carrying through the hall, you came to our world expecting submission. You found instead that we had prepared for conflict, but that was never our preferred outcome. He gestured, and a side door opened. Captain Daeho entered, the same diplomat who had been humiliated in the Taguk court a year ago. He walked with the same quiet dignity he had shown then, stopping beside Admiral Kyung and bowing respectfully to Jinnah. I believe you've met Captain Daeho, said Kyung. He has been our most passionate advocate for seeking a peaceful resolution. Jinnah's eyes narrowed. The same human who came begging for mercy on behalf of your species. Not begging, Daeho corrected gently. Offering friendship, an offer that was met with mockery and threats. The Empress lifted her chin. The strong do not befriend the weak. It is the natural order of the universe. A murmur ran through the assembled representatives. Admiral Kyung waited for quiet before responding. And yet here we are, he said, gesturing toward the dome above them, where the silhouettes of human supercarriers were visible against the stars. Strength is relative, Your Majesty, and often temporary. He moved to a large circular table at the center of the hall. Please, join us. There is much to discuss. Jinnah hesitated, then moved to the table with as much dignity as she could muster. She had expected to be executed or imprisoned, not invited to negotiations. The humans continued to surprise her, which was unsettling for a ruler used to predictable interactions with subjugated species. Admiral Kyung activated a holographic display above the table showing both Earth and Taguk Prime, with trade routes and territorial boundaries outlined in glowing lines. We have prepared a proposal, he explained. Not terms of surrender, either yours or ours, but a framework for coexistence. Jinnah studied the display with outward indifference. The Empire does not coexist. We rule. And how is that approach working at this moment? Asked Daeho quietly. The Empress's eyes flashed with anger, but she remained silent. Admiral Kyung continued, "Our proposal includes open trade routes between our systems, exchange of scientific knowledge, and mutual defense agreements. We recognize the Taguk Empire's existing territories. In exchange, Earth and its colonies are acknowledged as sovereign and independent." Jinnah laughed, though the sound lacked the confidence of her previous mockery. "You cannot believe the Empire would agree to this. When our main fleet arrives, it would face the same technology that neutralized your advance force," interrupted Commander Hyun, who had entered silently and now stood at the edge of the gathering. "Possibly worse, as our scientists continue to make improvements." The Empress looked between the human leaders, searching for weakness or deception. She found neither. "How?" she finally asked, a question that encompassed all that had happened. "How did you advance so quickly?" Engineer Subin stepped forward from among the Earth delegation. "You gave us a glimpse of what was possible," she explained. "Sometimes seeing the destination makes the journey clearer." "We are problem solvers by nature," added Dao. "Throughout our history, humanity has made its greatest leaps when faced with existential threats." Jinnah considered this. In the Taguk Empire's long history of expansion, they had encountered many species, but none that had responded like the humans. Most either fought immediately and lost, or surrendered without resistance. The humans had done neither. They had prepared while appearing to submit, a strategy no one had anticipated. "What happens if I refuse your proposal?" she asked. Admiral Kyung's expression remained neutral. "Then we return you to your fleet, and you are free to leave our solar system. But you would leave knowing that any future aggression would be met with the full force of our defense capabilities. The choice between peaceful cooperation and mutual destruction would be yours." A heavy silence fell over the hall. Everyone present understood the implications. The Taguk Empire was vast and powerful, but the humans had demonstrated technology that could neutralize that advantage. A full-scale war would be devastating for both civilizations. Jinnah closed her eyes briefly, weighing her options. When she opened them, her gaze fell on Captain Dao. "You," she said, addressing him directly. "You came to our court seeking cooperation from the beginning." Dao nodded. "It was always our preferred outcome. Still is. Yet you participated in this deception." "I advocated for both paths," he admitted. "Diplomatic outreach and defensive preparation. One does not exclude the other." The Empress studied him with new interest. Perhaps there was more complexity to these humans than she had initially believed. "Show me these terms in detail," she finally said. For the next several hours, the human leaders outlined the proposed agreement, now being called the Lunar Accord. It described not just peace between Earth and the Taguk Empire, but a framework for mutual growth and exchange. Trade routes, scientific collaboration, cultural understanding, all the elements that Dao had originally proposed, now presented from a position of equality rather than supplication. As the discussions continued, Jinnah began to see something she hadn't expected: opportunity. The humans had achieved technological breakthroughs that the Taguk hadn't considered possible. Their different perspective had led them to innovations that could benefit the Empire as well. "These terms," she said eventually, "are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" asked Admiral Kyung. "Demands for reparations, territory, resources." Jinnah gestured to the holographic display. "These proposals are balanced. We don't want conquest," Dao explained. "We never did. We want to join the galactic community as equals, to learn and contribute." The Empress looked at him with a mixture of confusion and grudging respect. "Your species is strange, Captain Dao. You prepare for war while desiring peace." "We call it hoping for the best while preparing for the worst," he replied with a small smile. "It served us well throughout our history." As the lunar day progressed, the terms were refined and clarified. Jinnah's initial resistance gradually gave way to pragmatic acceptance. The Empire was still powerful, but the humans had proven themselves formidable in ways no one had anticipated. A protracted conflict would be costly for both sides. Finally, as Earth rose over the lunar horizon, casting blue light through the dome, Jinnah made her decision. "I will sign your lunar accord," she announced, "with one condition." The human representatives tensed slightly. Admiral Kyung nodded for her to continue. "The Empire requires access to the engineers who developed your shield technology, not to copy it." She raised a hand as protests began. "But to understand how you improved upon our design so quickly. Such innovation is valuable." Engineer Subin stepped forward. "I would be willing to lead a scientific exchange, with proper safeguards for both sides." Jinnah inclined her head in acknowledgement. "Acceptable." With that, a final barrier was removed. The formal signing ceremony was arranged for the following day, with broadcasts to be sent simultaneously to Earth and Taguk Prime. As the gathering dispersed, Jinnah found herself momentarily alone with Captain Daho. "You took quite a risk, Captain," she said quietly. "If your deception had failed, your world would have been destroyed." Daho nodded. "We knew the stakes, but we also believed in our capacity to rise to the challenge." "And now," she asked, "do you believe this peace can last?" He considered the question carefully before answering. "I believe it has a better foundation than most. It's built on mutual respect rather than fear alone." The Empress studied him, seeing wisdom she had missed during their first meeting. "You humans surprised me. That rarely happens." "Good," Daho replied with a small smile. "The universe would be boring otherwise." The next day, beneath the transparent dome of the Grand Hall of Unity, Empress Jinnah and Admiral Kyung signed the Lunar Accord. As promised, both Earth and Taguk Prime received the broadcast simultaneously. On countless worlds throughout the galaxy, species under Taguk rule watched with amazement as the proud Empress treated humans as equals. Word spread quickly through trade routes and communication networks. The humans, a species unknown to most of the galaxy until now, had accomplished something unprecedented. They had faced the Taguk Empire at the height of its power and emerged not just surviving but standing as equals. On Taguk Prime, the Imperial Council watched the signing ceremony with shock and disbelief. One elderly counselor turned to his colleagues and spoke words that would be repeated throughout the galaxy in the coming months. "Remember this day. It marks the end of unquestioned Taguk dominance." The Empress laughed at humanity, but their response has changed the stars themselves. As the ceremony concluded, Jinnah approached Engineer Subin with a question that had been bothering her since the confrontation. "Your ships," she said. "There were exactly 200. Why that number?" Subin smiled. "It was all we could build in the time we had. If you had given us 2 years instead of 1, there would have been 1,000. The Empress of the mighty Taguk Empire, who had once dismissed humans as barely worth conquering, found herself speechless. And somewhere in that moment of stunned silence lay the foundation of a new galactic order, one where humanity would reach for the stars not as conquerors or subjects, but as innovators and equals.